It may seem like a strange time to talk about overcoming the resistance to letting people continue working from home. That's a long title, by the way. It may seem like a strange time to talk about that with cases up and lockdowns growing. And you may say, Kevin, we don't have to worry about this right now because we've got to have people at home. Our governor has told us so. But today we're going to talk about that resistance that exists, whether you're here as a leader in an organization trying to help others pass that resistance, whether you're here because you're a team member hoping to be able to continue to work from home, or whether you're a leader struggling with all of this yourself. Hi, welcome to Live with Kevin. I'm Kevin Eikenberry, and I'm here today to talk to you about some of the resistance that I'm sensing and that I'm hearing about and that we're talking to clients about. Yeah, it may seem strange to talk about it today, but now's why, exactly when we need to talk about it. Today's Live is brought to you by our new book. See it up there in the corner? The Long Distance Teammate. Stay engaged and connected while working from anywhere is the subtitle. You can't read that up there in the corner, but you can go to longdistanceteammate.com, learn more about the book, pre-order it today. We'd love to have you join us. But let's talk about this resistance. See, the source may be from some people who don't want to come back to work, but really who I'm talking to today, or talking about today, are the leaders that are saying, listen, I can't wait till we can get everybody back in the office. And of course, I'm not talking about people in warehousing or in manufacturing or in other areas where people already are still working together, but all those folks where you back in March had to send people home and you were forced to do that. And you were looking forward to the choice to say, we're going to bring people back. We're going to bring it back to the way it was before. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about that. And by the way, if you're here with me live and not watching this later, you can ask questions, say hello, all of that. You're here. So let me know what you think. Let me know what your concerns are, what your questions are, anything about remote work or remote leadership. I'll be happy to talk about them. But I do want to talk about this challenge a bit too. So again, we were forced back in March to send people home. The virus and our legislators and our elected officials said, we're sending everybody home. Our own good judgment said, we're going to send everybody home. And many of you are waiting for that chance to say, maybe we'll just take it back to the way it was. We're hoping that 2021 can look like 2019, or at least maybe the second half of 2021. But I think that we're at a point where we have to think about this more than just waiting for the chance to bring everybody back. The reality is that 2021 will be different than 2019. And I'm not talking about January. I'm talking about after there's a vaccine and after people have taken it, it's going to be different. What the workplace looks like and how people define it is going to look different. It just is. I've got a daughter who's going to graduate from college in the spring. And what her experience with work will be significantly different than mine was or has been. You know, for me, even though I've led a remote team for a decade, a largely remote team for a decade, work still is something that a place that you go to. And even though I've written books about remote leadership and now remote work was still a place we went to. But for Kelsey, that won't really be the case. Kelsey's situation will be different. Kelsey will see a world of work that looks far more varied and far more flexible, and it may not even have a place like many of us had. So more flexibility is going to be expected. More flexibility has been experienced. And for our younger team members, that's what the only thing they will only have experienced. And so choice will have to be a part of the picture. And if you think about it this way, choice has never really been the way we've thought about it, right? People come to the office. Here's where the office is. Here's where you need to live. You need to live close enough that you can commute to this place. Won't be the future. But before I say more, though, about the future, or we talk about this choice, which is going to be the predominant theme of my conversation with you today, let's go backward, okay? Let's look about the history of work rather than just talking about the future of work. Here's the history of work. For most of recorded history, we would call it the pre-industrial age. And so what did work look like? Work looked like working in very small groups, maybe learning a trade or learning some skills from a family member or from someone who supervised your work. And so work looked like, I learned this from someone really good. They supervise me. I get better at it. And eventually I'm able to do it myself. And then along came the industrial age, and eventually later in the industrial age, the assembly line. But in the industrial age, we basically took the same model, and we said, we've got to have people watching people, teaching them how to do the job, and then watching them to make sure they're getting it done right. And so originally it was supervision of one, then it became supervision of many, and then came the rise of knowledge work. And yet we still tried to lead in many of the same ways. I'm not saying that there isn't a role for leaders to be trainers. I'm not saying that that isn't in coaches, but the supervision aspect of this has continued, and we've hung on to it throughout the rise of knowledge work, right up to the changes of technology that allow me to do what I'm doing right now, to fundamentally be on television on your computer. So the technologies of communication that have allowed us and facilitated the relative ease of us sending everybody home when we had to is also real. The technologies of communication that have come to pass in the last 20 years, 15 years, 10 years, 5 years even, have allowed us to do some of this. So all of the history of work is built on that progression. And then this year, we added COVID-19. COVID-19 is the only one of these things that's a moment. Now, I realize it feels like a current moment to us because we're living in it. But in the future, when we look back, we're going to see it as a tipping point, a turning point, a change of what work looks like. So when we think back, if you're a leader who was pretty comfortable with the way it was, maybe have led or supervised that way for a long time, you're wanting to be careful. Why would I want to go away from what I already know, from the tried and the true? Well, that history leads us to that tipping point of COVID-19, which leads us to the future that I've already described to you, a world full of flexible work, different ways in which people will work, more hybrid and blended teams, and more straight up remote and virtual teams, and less people necessarily needing to or having to always be in the office. And yet there are leaders among us who are saying, but I want that. I want to go back to that place. Well, let me give you another piece of information that maybe you haven't thought about. And that is the age of our workforce, right? So what's the age of our workforce? Well, let's just be pretty clear about this. People that are my age, baby boomers, are going to be fewer and fewer, a smaller and smaller part of the workforce, right? So if you look at it this way, in 2025, 64% of the workforce will be millennials and Generation Z. Not even the Generation X, which is younger than me. So 64% in just 4 years, 64%, more significantly, 2/3 of the population will be between 44 and in their early 20s. That will be those two generations, right? The Xers will be between 45 and 60 in 4 years. And me, well, I'll be older than that. So when we think about the future, we look at this moment in time, this tipping point. We have to think about where the future leads us and who's going to be doing the work. And who's going to be doing the work? The people that have three factors. Number one, they are much more digitally comfortable, right? Many of them growing up with some of the technologies that we're now using to facilitate remote work. So they'll be more comfortable with it. They'll be more adept with it. And a larger percentage of their working life will have looked like it. So it's no wonder that their expectation will be more flexibility, more transferability, and we're going to have a wider variety of ways to work. So let's think about this like an economist. So from an economist perspective, you've got the supply side. That's the work, right? So we've been living in a world with more flexible work over the last several months, right? And we've learned that it's viable. And we have a workforce that is saying, I want more flexible work, and that it is desirable. So the demand side says it's desirable. The supply side says it's feasible or viable. So that sets the table for us to do a future that has more remote work, right? And yet the frustration and the resistance and the I want it to be like it used to be is going to get in the way, because the future says there needs to be more flexibility. So change is coming, you could say. I would actually say that change is here. Yes, right now, for a variety of factors, you've been forced to or strongly encouraged to have people working from home. That's true. There will come a time in the middle of next year, sometime, when those choices will be back on the table for you. And I'm encouraging you to think about those choices more than just what you personally prefer, more than just your status quo, more than just your comfort level, because the reality is that change is coming. Change is already here, and the winners will be those that change. Even if you say, well, we can still be successful, you're going to start to lose the talent battle, because on the demand side, people are going to say, I want more flexible work. And if you're not going to offer that to me, I'm going somewhere else. You're going to lose some of your best people, and you're going to have a harder and harder time attracting the kind of people you want. So I say all this to you, if we're going to talk about this idea of overcoming this resistance, is I want you to get past the thought of, but Kevin, that's not what I want. Or, but Kevin, what about all the issues all the things that we lose? The interactivity that we had when people are in the workplace. And what I'm saying to you is, in a hybrid team, in a blended team with more flexible work, you're going to need to find ways to build collaboration. I can tell you it can be done. You're going to need to find ways to engage your team members when they're not always together. I can tell you it can be done. All of it is going to require you to change. And overcoming this resistance is in your best interest. It's in the best interest of your teams, even if it puts you in a bit of a challenging spot, even if it pushes you out of the limits of your comfort zone, because the future's coming. The future's nearly here. And it's up to us as leaders to lead that. And the organizations and the individual leaders that are able to and willing to make those adaptations, to say, yeah, 2021 is going to look different than 2019 and 2018, and are willing to adapt, not just because they were forced, but because they chose to, are going to be the winners. So I encourage you, I challenge you, I wish you the very best as you do that. And if there's any way that we can help, please let us know. My challenge to you before we go is to think about this. Now what? What am I going to do with this information? If I've been speaking to you personally, it's time for you to do some soul searching. If I've been speaking to you and you're thinking about this organizationally, it's time to raise this conversation in your organization. And if I'm talking to you and you're a team member trying to think about how you help your leader get past their resistance, I'm saying this to you to recognize that resistance is real. Don't just assume they're an old fuddy-duddy that doesn't want to change, but hopefully this gives you some ideas to think about why that resistance exists and how you can help them get past it too. That's my hope for you today. That's my challenge for you today. And if you found this useful, make sure you come back. We're doing lives every week on Monday at this time, sometimes just me, sometimes me with a guest, sometimes as a future episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. This Live with Kevin has been brought to you by our upcoming book, January 2021, The Long Distance Teammate. You can learn more about The Long Distance Teammate at longdistanceteammate.com. Until then, till the next time, I encourage you to think about the future of work. I encourage you to think about your role in creating a future of work that will make a positive difference for you, your team, and your organization. And when you do that, you'll be on the path to being a more remarkable leader. Thanks, everybody.